Welcome to Michael Zane Trustee's Track Talk, where every track tells a story. What if I told you the king of rock and roll had a secret soundtrack to his soul? Beyond the glitz, the gold records, and the screaming crowds, Elvis Presley carried something far deeper. His heart always returned to gospel music, the hymns that reminded him of home, of faith, and of the hope he longed for. These weren't just songs he sang on stage. They were confessions. They were prayers. And many times, they were the only peace he could find. Elvis grew up in Tupelo, Mississippi, in a poor but deeply religious family. His mother, Gladys, was the spiritual anchor of the household. She brought him to the small Assembly of God Church, where he first heard gospel quartets and fiery Southern preaching. Imagine young Elvis, barely tall enough to see over the pews, sitting wide-eyed as the harmonies of gospel groups filled that little church. That was the soundtrack of his childhood, long before rock and roll, long before Hollywood. Gospel music had planted its seed. As his career exploded, Elvis often felt trapped in the machine of fame. Managers, contracts, and endless tours pushed him into a world he never truly fit into. But when the pressure was too heavy, he would gather friends around the piano late into the night and sing gospel songs. Songs like Peace in the Valley, How Great Thou Art, and Where Could I Go But to the Lord. These weren't performances for the cameras. These were the moments Elvis felt most himself. Friends recalled that his eyes would close, his voice would drop soft, and for a few minutes the king wasn't entertaining anyone. He was praying. Here's something many fans don't realize. Elvis won 3 Grammy Awards in his career, and every single one of them was for gospel music, not for Hound Dog, not for Jailhouse Rock, but for How Great Thou Art, and He Touched Me. Think about that. The man who defined rock and roll, who sold more records than nearly anyone in history, was honored most for his gospel songs. Even the industry recognized that when Elvis sang gospel, he was singing from the deepest part of his soul. One of the most famous stories comes from his Las Vegas years. After the shows, long past midnight, Elvis would invite the band, the backup singers, and sometimes hotel staff to his suite. Instead of wild parties, many nights turned into impromptu gospel sing-alongs that lasted until sunrise. J.D. Sumner, the bass singer from the Stamps Quartet, said Elvis could go for hours without tiring, singing old hymns until his voice was completely worn out. And yet he kept going, because those songs restored him in a way nothing else could. Even near the end of his life, when health struggles and the weight of fame were closing in, gospel music was still his safe place. Just days before his passing in 1977, friends remembered him sitting at the piano, quietly singing Unchained Melody, and then slipping into a gospel hymn, almost as a whispered prayer. It was as if, at the very end, Elvis wanted to remind himself, and maybe remind us all, of where his true hope rested. So while the world remembers Elvis Presley as the king of rock and roll, behind the crown was a man who found his greatest peace in the old hymns of faith. His secret soundtrack wasn't the roar of the crowd. It wasn't the charts. It was gospel. And in those songs, you can hear the soul of Elvis Presley. Not just the legend. You've been listening to Michael Zane Trustee's Track Talk, where every track tells a story. If you enjoyed this journey into the King's gospel roots, don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell, because we've got more untold stories of country, rock, and gospel legends coming your way.